Chapter 1. The morning after. The coffee in Mara Chen's hand had gone cold an hour ago. She stood at her office window on the 42nd floor of the Sterling building, watching the Chicago sunrise paint the skyline in shades of amber and rose, and tried not to think about what had happened in this very room 12 hours earlier. She failed spectacularly, his mouth on hers, his hands tangled in her hair, her back against the glass, breathless and burning. "Stop it," she whispered to her reflection, barely visible in the brightening glass. "Stop thinking about it." Mara Chen didn't do impulsive. She didn't do messy. And she absolutely, under no circumstances, did she kiss her business partner. Except she had. She set down the cold coffee with a hand that trembled only slightly, a small victory, and pulled out her phone. 3 missed calls from her mother, 2 texts from her assistant, and 1 email that made her stomach drop. From Dominic Kane. Subject: "We need to talk time." 6:47 a.m. Of course he was already here. Dominic Kane probably hadn't slept. The man ran on ambition and espresso, building Kane and Chen Creative from a garage startup to a $30 million agency in just 5 years. He didn't sleep when there were pitches to perfect, clients to impress, or apparently boundaries to demolish. Mara had co-founded the agency with him straight out of graduate school, when they were both 25 and stupid enough to think they could compete with the giants. Somehow, they'd done it. She brought the creative vision, he brought the business savvy, and an uncanny ability to charm anyone into anything, including, evidently, her. She closed her eyes, but the memory was relentless. They'd been working late on the Castellano Luxury Hotel's pitch, the biggest of their careers, worth $20 million if they landed it. The presentation was perfect. They'd ordered Thai food, opened a bottle of wine to celebrate, and somewhere between laughing about their first, failed campaign and reminiscing about the early days, something had shifted. The air had changed. Dominic had been standing close, too close, his dark eyes intense in the low light of her office. "We're going to win this," he'd said softly. "You know that, right? Everything we've worked for, it's all coming together." "We've worked hard," she'd agreed, trying to ignore how her pulse had quickened. "You've worked miracles." His voice had dropped lower. "Mara, I need to tell you something." And then she'd kissed him. God help her, she'd kissed him. She'd moved without thinking, closing that dangerous distance, pressing her mouth to his with 5 years of suppressed tension suddenly unleashed. And Dominic had responded like a man who'd been waiting his entire life for permission. It had been spectacular, devastating, world-tilting, and completely, absolutely, catastrophically wrong. She'd pulled away, breathless and horrified. This can't happen again. He'd looked at her, with eyes dark as midnight, still holding her close, and said the words that had echoed in her mind all night. "It will, every night, if I have my way." Then her phone had rung her mother, with news about her father's health scare, and Mara had fled. Now, standing in the golden morning light, she knew she had to face him. Professional. Boundaries. They would pretend it never happened, nail the Castellano pitch on Friday, and move forward as business partners. Nothing more. The decision made, Mara smoothed her slate-gray dress, checked her reflection one final time, and headed for the door. She made it 3 steps into the hallway before she saw him. Dominic Kane stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows near the elevator bank, coffee in hand, wearing charcoal slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and the shadow of stubble on his jaw suggested he really hadn't slept. He turned when he heard her heels on the polished floor, and their eyes met. The air between them crackled with electricity. "Mara." His voice was rough, intimate, the voice of a man who'd kissed her breathless and wanted to do it again. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about." She kept walking, kept her spine straight and her expression neutral. "Professional. Boundaries. Last night was a mistake. We had too much wine. We got caught up in the moment. It won't happen again." She tried to step past him toward the elevators. He moved to block her path, not aggressively, but deliberately. "Look at me," he said quietly. "Dominic, look at me." Against her better judgment, she did. His eyes were the color of dark chocolate, flecked with gold in the morning light, and they held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "That wasn't the wine," he said softly. "That wasn't the moment. That was 5 years of working side by side with the most brilliant, beautiful, frustrating woman I've ever met, and finally admitting what we both feel." "You don't know what I feel. You're terrified," he interrupted, stepping closer. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, sandalwood, and cedar. Close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. You're terrified because we built this company together, and you think a relationship would destroy everything we've worked for. You're afraid of what your family would think, what the industry would say. You're afraid that if we try and fail, you'll lose your best friend and your business partner. Mara's heart was hammering. Then you understand why. I understand why you're scared, Dominic said, his voice dropping to that low, dangerous register that did things to her pulse. But I also understand something else, Mara. I've spent 5 years keeping my distance because I thought that's what you needed. 5 years watching other men ask you out, watching you date people who couldn't possibly understand what drives you, what makes you extraordinary. He lifted one hand, slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she stood frozen, trapped by his gaze, he tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. I'm done pretending, he whispered. I'm done acting like you're just my business partner when you're the first thing I think about every morning and the last thought in my head every night. What happened yesterday wasn't a mistake. It was inevitable. Dominic, her voice came out strangled. Tell me you didn't feel it, he challenged softly. Tell me that kiss meant nothing, and I'll walk away. We'll keep things professional, land the Castellano deal, and never speak of this again. It would be so easy to lie, so easy to protect everything they'd built. But Mara Chen had never been a liar. She started. The elevator dinged. They both jumped apart as the doors slid open, and Jessica Hartley, their creative director and Mara's best friend, stepped out, already talking into her phone. No, tell the Castellano people we can move the presentation to Thursday if... She looked up, saw them standing close together, and her perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. Oh, am I interrupting something? No, Mara said quickly, stepping back. Just discussing the pitch. At 7 in the morning? Before the coffee cart arrives? Jessica's green eyes sparkled with curiosity as she looked between them. How dedicated. The Castellano pitch is in 2 days, Dominic said smoothly, but his eyes never left Mara's face. We're just making sure everything's perfect. Jessica clearly didn't believe them, but she was too tactful to push. Well, when you're done discussing the pitch, we have a situation. Richard Castellano just called. He wants to move the presentation up to tomorrow morning. Something about his schedule changing. Mara's stomach dropped. Tomorrow? But we'll be ready, Dominic said firmly. He finally broke eye contact with her to address Jessica. Call everyone in. Full team meeting at 9. We'll do a complete run-through this afternoon. Jessica nodded and headed toward her office, but not before shooting Mara a look that clearly said we're talking about this later. The moment she was gone, the tension returned. Mara, Dominic started. I have to go. She moved past him, stabbing the elevator button. We have work to do. A pitch to finalize. That has to be the priority. The elevator arrived. She stepped inside. Dominic caught the door before it could close, leaning against the frame with one hand. His expression was serious, determined, and something else. Something that made her pulse race. After the pitch, he said quietly, you and I are finishing this conversation. There's nothing to finish. Mara. He smiled then, slow and devastating. You can run from this all you want. But yesterday, you kissed me like you've been wanting to for years. And I promise you that's going to happen again. Her breath caught. Dominic. Every night, if I have my way, he said, echoing his words from the night before. Then he stepped back, letting the elevator doors close between them. Mara sagged against the polished steel wall, her heart racing. This was a disaster. The biggest pitch of their careers was tomorrow. Her business, her reputation, everything she'd built was on the line. She couldn't afford distractions. She couldn't afford to mix business with pleasure. She couldn't afford to want Dominic Kane the way she did, desperately, dangerously, with an intensity that terrified her. But as the elevator descended, Mara touched her fingers to her lips and admitted what she'd been denying all night. She wanted exactly what he'd promised. Chapter 2. The collaboration. The conference room was chaos by 9 a.m. Mara stood at the head of the glass table, watching her team argue over color palettes and campaign slogans, and tried to channel her nervous energy into productivity. It wasn't working. Dominic sat across from her, laptop open, seemingly focused on the financial projections for the Castellano campaign. But every few minutes, his dark eyes would flick up to meet hers, and the intensity in his gaze would make her lose her train of thought. The tagline needs work, Jessica announced, pushing her blonde hair behind her ears. She'd been with Kane and Chen since their second year, leaving a position at a prestigious Madison Avenue firm to take a chance on them. Luxury, redefined, feels generic. Castellano isn't just another hotel chain, they're selling an experience. What about where moments become memories? Suggested Marco Rodriguez, their junior copywriter. At 23, he was brilliant but still learning the difference between poetic and pretentious. Too sentimental, Dominic said, but his tone was kind. Castellano's clientele are high-powered executives and old money families. They want sophistication, not sentimentality. What if we flip the approach entirely? Mara heard herself say. Everyone turned to look at her. What if instead of telling them what Castellano is, we show them what it isn't? A campaign built on contrast. Not just another stay, not just another memory, not just another hotel. The room fell silent. Jessica's eyes lit up. Oh, that's good. That's really good. We could use black and white photography, Marco added, leaning forward excitedly. Stark, dramatic. Show the difference between ordinary luxury and Castellano's level of service. Dominic was watching her with an expression that made her stomach flip. Brilliant, he said softly. That's exactly the angle we need. For the next 3 hours, they worked in perfect synchronization the way they always had. Mara would sketch out a visual concept. Jessica would refine the messaging. Marco would craft the copy, and Dominic would ensure it aligned with the client's business objectives. It was the creative alchemy that had built their reputation. But today, every time Mara's hand brushed Dominic's as they reached for the same presentation mock-up, electricity sparked between them. Every time he leaned close to examine her sketches, she caught the scent of his cologne and remembered how it had surrounded her last night. Every time their eyes met, the unfinished conversation hung between them like a live wire. By noon, they had a complete pitch. By 1, they'd rehearsed it twice. By 2, Mara's nerves were frayed to the point of snapping. Everyone take a break, she announced, needing distance from Dominic's overwhelming presence. We'll do one final run-through at 4, then call it early. Fresh eyes tomorrow morning. The team scattered gratefully. Jessica lingered, clearly wanting to interrogate Mara about the morning's tension, but a pointed look from Mara sent her reluctantly toward the door. I'm not letting this go, Jessica warned. Drinks tonight? Rain check, Mara said. I need to review the financials with Dominic. Jessica's eyebrows rose meaningfully, but she left without comment. The conference room emptied. Suddenly, Mara was alone with Dominic, and a silence that felt heavy with unspoken words. You were brilliant today, he said, not looking up from his laptop. That campaign concept, it's going to win us the account. It was a team effort. Mara began gathering scattered presentation boards, needing something to do with her hands. Everyone contributed. Mara. She ignored him, stacking boards with unnecessary precision. Mara, look at me. We should review the budget breakdown one more time, she said, still not meeting his eyes. Make sure the numbers align with... In one smooth motion, Dominic closed his laptop, stood, and rounded the table. He didn't touch her, didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to make her breath catch. Why are you running from me? He asked quietly. I'm not running. I'm working. You've been avoiding eye contact all morning. You practically fled when the team took a break, and you're currently rearranging presentation boards that are already perfectly organized. He moved closer, stopping just short of her personal space. Talk to me. Mara set down the boards and finally met his gaze. What do you want me to say, Dominic? That last night happened? It did. That it was a mistake? It was. Why? The simple question threw her. Why? Because we're business partners. Because we've built this company together, and mixing personal with professional is what, complicated? His dark eyes held hers. Life is complicated, Mara. That doesn't mean we avoid the things that matter. This company matters, she said, her voice rising slightly. Everything we've built, our reputation, our team, our future, it all matters. And if we cross that line and it goes wrong, what then? Do we lose everything because we couldn't keep our personal feelings separate? And if we don't cross that line, Dominic countered softly, if we spend the next 5 years pretending there's nothing between us, is that better? Is that really what you want? No. God, no. It wasn't. But admitting that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. My parents had a partnership, she said instead, the words coming out raw. Before my father got sick, they ran a restaurant together. They were married 25 years, partners in business and life. And when things started going bad, when the stress piled up, when the restaurant struggled, their marriage couldn't handle it. They almost lost everything, Dominic. The business, the marriage, all of it. Understanding flickered across his face. Your family thinks business and romance don't mix. My family thinks business and romance are a recipe for disaster, she corrected. And they're not wrong. I've seen what happens when the personal bleeds into the professional. It destroys both. Or, Dominic said gently, it strengthens both. Mara, we're not your parents. We're not anyone else. What we have, this partnership we've built, it works because of who we are together, not in spite of it. He took one step closer, then another. Mara's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it. I'm not asking you to risk everything, he said, his voice low and earnest. I'm asking you to consider that what we could have together might be worth the risk, because I've spent 5 years watching you build empires out of ideas, turn clients' vague dreams into concrete success, fight for every single person on our team. I've seen you at your strongest and your most vulnerable. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with all of it. The breath left Mara's lungs in a rush. I'm in love with you, Dominic said simply, as if the words weren't rearranging her entire world. I have been for years. And last night, when you kissed me, I thought maybe you felt the same way. Mara couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't process the enormity of what he'd just said. You don't have to say anything right now, Dominic continued, his eyes searching hers. I know you're scared. I know this is complicated, but I need you to know this isn't going away. What I feel for you isn't something I can compartmentalize or ignore. It's there when we're strategizing campaigns, when we're celebrating victories, when we're working through midnight to meet deadlines. It's always been there, Dominic. Her voice cracked. I'm not going to push, he said. We have a pitch tomorrow that could change everything for this company. That comes first. But after we win the Castellano account, after we prove to ourselves and everyone else that we're unstoppable, I'm going to ask you out properly. Dinner, flowers, the whole thing. And I'm going to spend the evening trying to convince you that taking a chance on us is the best decision you'll ever make. He smiled then, and it transformed his entire face, softening the sharp edges, reaching his eyes with genuine warmth. Until then, he said, let's do what we do best. Let's win. Before she could respond, he turned and walked toward the door. He paused at the threshold, looking back. For what it's worth, he added quietly, I think we could be extraordinary together, in business and everything else. Then he was gone, leaving Mara alone in the empty conference room, her thoughts in chaos and her heart racing. She sank into a chair, pressing her hands to her flushed cheeks. Dominic Kane was in love with her. The knowledge settled over her like warm honey, sweet, surprising, and absolutely terrifying, because the truth she'd been avoiding all day, the truth she'd been suppressing for longer than she could admit, was simple. She was in love with him too. Chapter 3. The Pitch. Thursday morning arrived with unseasonable cold and threatening clouds. Mara stood in front of her closet at 6 a.m., staring at her wardrobe like it held the answers to the universe. What did one wear to the most important pitch of her career? A pitch that would happen mere hours before her business partner asked her on a date. A date. With Dominic. She grabbed a burgundy sheath dress that was professional but powerful, paired it with black heels, and tried to focus on the task at hand. Castellano luxury hotels. $20 million. Everything they'd worked for. Not the fact that Dominic Kane was in love with her. Her phone buzzed. You're going to be amazing today, D. Her treacherous heart skipped a beat. By 8:30, they were in the lobby of Castellano's downtown Chicago headquarters, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that screamed old money and new ambition. Richard Castellano had inherited a small chain of boutique hotels from his father and transformed them into a luxury empire spanning 3 continents. Landing him as a client would validate everything Kane and Chen Creative had built. Ready? Dominic asked, adjusting his navy tie. He looked devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit that had definitely been tailored to emphasize his broad shoulders. Mara dragged her eyes away from the way the fabric stretched across his chest. Ready. Jessica, Marco, and their presentation specialist, Aaron, were already setting up in the 14th floor conference room, a space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. The view alone probably cost more than Mara's first car. Richard Castellano arrived at exactly 9 o'clock, flanked by his CMO, Elena Vasquez, and his notoriously difficult VP of brand development, Thomas Whitmore. Whitmore had a reputation for eviscerating agencies who wasted his time. 3 firms had pitched already. All had been rejected. Kane, Chen. Richard shook their hands with a grip that conveyed both power and assessment. He was 62, silver-haired, and had the kind of presence that commanded immediate respect. I hope you're not going to waste our time like the others. We're not like the others, Dominic said with easy confidence. We're better. Richard's lips twitched. Prove it. The next 45 minutes were a masterclass in collaborative presentation. Mara led with the creative vision, her voice strong and clear as she walked them through the campaign concept. Not just another, it's a challenge and a promise. Not just another hotel, because Castellano offers experiences that can't be replicated. Not just another stay, because your properties create memories that last lifetimes. Not just another luxury brand, because you've redefined what luxury means. Jessica took over the messaging strategy, her sharp intellect evident in every carefully chosen word. Marco presented the copywriting samples, his youthful enthusiasm balanced by surprisingly sophisticated prose. Aaron demonstrated the digital integration, showing how the campaign would live across multiple platforms. And Dominic brought it home with the business case, demonstrating exactly how. Their campaign would increase Castellano's market share, brand recognition, and revenue projections over the next 3 years. They worked together like a well-oiled machine, anticipating each other's transitions, building on each other's points, presenting a unified front that showcased not just their individual talents, but their collective brilliance. When they finished, the room fell silent. Elena Vasquez was smiling. Thomas Whitmore was typing notes rapidly on his tablet, never a bad sign. And Richard Castellano was studying them with an expression Mara couldn't quite read. Questions? Dominic asked. Just one, Richard said, leaning back in his leather chair. Why should I trust a 5-year-old agency with the most important rebrand in my company's history? Mara didn't hesitate. Because we're not 5 years old, Mr. Castellano. We're 5 years battle-tested. We started in a garage with nothing but ideas and determination. Every client we've won by being better, smarter, hungrier than the competition. We don't have the legacy of the big agencies, but we have something they lost a long time ago. We care. About the work, Dominic added, standing beside her. About the clients. About creating campaigns that don't just win awards but actually move the needle for the businesses we partner with. That pitch you just saw? We didn't create it to impress you. We created it because we believe in what Castellano Hotels represents. And what's that? Thomas asked, looking up from his tablet. Mara smiled. Excellence that doesn't apologize for itself. You're not trying to be the biggest luxury hotel chain. You're trying to be the best. That's what we are too. Another silence. Longer this time. Then Richard Castellano smiled a real smile, warm and genuine. Elena, what do you think? I think they just did what 3 established agencies couldn't, Elena said, her dark eyes bright with excitement. They showed us who we are and who we could be. Thomas? The VP of Brand Development looked directly at Mara. When can you start? Mara's heart stopped. I'm sorry? When can you start? Richard repeated, standing and extending his hand. Welcome to the Castellano family, Kane and Chen Creative. Let's change the industry together. The next few minutes passed in a blur of handshakes, congratulations, and preliminary timeline discussions. Jessica was beaming. Marco looked like he might cry. Aaron was already sketching timelines on his tablet, and Dominic was watching Mara with an expression that made her breath catch. Pride, joy, and something deeper, more intense. Love. By 10:30, they were back in the elevator, contracts pending legal review, $20 million virtually guaranteed, and the biggest victory of their professional lives secured. The moment the elevator doors closed, Jessica let out a shriek that probably violated several noise ordinances. We did it! She grabbed Mara in a fierce hug. Oh my God, we actually did it! Marco and Aaron were high-fiving. Dominic was grinning, hands in his pockets, looking more relaxed than Mara had seen him in days. Team celebration tonight, he announced. Drinks and dinner on the company. We've earned it. Damn right we have, Jessica said, still bouncing. I'm texting everyone. This is Mara. This is everything we've worked for. This was the moment that validated every late night, every risk they'd taken, every impossible deadline they'd met. Kane and Chen Creative was officially in the big leagues. Mara should have been euphoric. Instead, she was acutely aware of Dominic standing beside her, of the promise he'd made yesterday, of the conversation they needed to have now that the pitch was over. After we win the Castellano account, After we prove to ourselves and everyone else that we're unstoppable, I'm going to ask you out properly." They'd won, which meant the next move was hers. The celebration that evening was held at Vertigo, a rooftop restaurant with a view that stretched across the entire Chicago skyline. Dominic had reserved the private room, and by 7 p.m., the entire Kane and Chen team had gathered 23 people who'd all played a role in building their success. Mara stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, champagne in hand, watching her team laugh and celebrate, and felt the weight of the day finally settling on her shoulders. They'd done it. Actually done it. "Quite a view," a familiar voice said beside her. She turned to find Dominic, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. He offered her one, even though she already had a glass. "I already have," she started. "Humor me," he said with a slight smile. "It's symbolic." She took the glass, intrigued despite herself. "Symbolic how?" "Fresh start," he said simply, clinking his glass gently against hers. "New chapter." The crystal rang with a clear, pure note. Mara's heart was pounding again. "Dominic, dance with me," he interrupted, nodding toward the small space where a few couples were swaying to the jazz trio playing in the corner. "I don't think one dance," he said, his dark eyes holding hers. "Then we'll talk. I promise." Against her better judgment, against every instinct, screaming that this was dangerous territory, Mara set down both champagne glasses and let him lead her to the dance floor. The moment his hand settled on her waist, the moment she placed her palm against his chest and felt his heart beating beneath her fingers, she knew she was lost. They moved together easily, naturally, the same way they did everything. "You were incredible today," Dominic said quietly, his breath warm against her temple. "Watching you present to Castellano, you were unstoppable." "We were unstoppable," she corrected. "All of us." "Yes," he agreed. "But you, Mara, you're extraordinary. The way your mind works, the way you see connections others miss, the way you inspire everyone around you. I've never met anyone like you." She looked up at him, and the intensity in his gaze stole her breath. "I meant what I said yesterday," he continued, his voice low enough that only she could hear over the music. "I'm in love with you, and I know you're scared. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this seems like a terrible idea, but there are 1,000 reasons," Mara interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "This could ruin everything we've built. It could destroy our partnership, damage our team, complicate every aspect of our business. It could," Dominic acknowledged. Or it could be exactly what Jessica said this morning." Mara continued, surprising herself. "She pulled me aside before we left for the pitch." "Do you know what she told me?" He shook his head. "She said, 'Whatever's happening between you two, don't run from it. I've watched you work together for 3 years, and I've never seen 2 people more perfectly matched.' She said the reason Kane and Chen work so well isn't because we keep our personal and professional lives separate. It's because we don't know how to separate them." Dominic had gone very still. "What are you saying?" Mara took a breath. 5 years of partnership, 5 years of friendship, 5 years of denying the connection between them. It all came down to this moment. "I'm saying I've been lying to myself," she said quietly. "I've been so afraid of losing what we have that I couldn't see what we could have. But you're right, this isn't going away. And I'm tired of pretending." Hope flared in his eyes. "Mara, I'm terrified," she admitted. "I'm terrified of what happens if this goes wrong, but I'm more terrified of spending the rest of my life wondering what if." So, she didn't get to finish the sentence. Dominic's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone, and the tenderness in the gesture made her breath catch. "So?" he prompted, his voice rough with emotion. "So yes," Mara whispered. "Yes to dinner. Yes to taking a chance. Yes to whatever this is between us." The smile that spread across Dominic's face was radiant, transforming him from the serious businessman she'd known for 5 years into someone younger, freer, incandescent with joy. "I'm going to kiss you now," he warned, giving her time to pull away. "Right here, in front of everyone. And tomorrow, the entire office is going to know that something's changed between us. Are you okay with that?" Mara's heart was racing, but her answer was immediate. "Yes, thank God," Dominic breathed, and then his mouth was on hers. The kiss was nothing like the desperate passion of 2 nights ago. This was slower, sweeter, a promise rather than a conflagration. His lips moved against hers with reverent gentleness, one hand cradling her face while the other drew her closer. She melted into him, her fingers curling into his suit jacket, and let herself feel everything she'd been suppressing for so long. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the music had stopped. The entire room was staring at them. Jessica was grinning like the Cheshire Cat. Marco's jaw had dropped. Aaron looked delighted, and the rest of their team was watching with expressions ranging from surprise to satisfaction, to knowing smiles that suggested this development was exactly 0% unexpected. "Well," Dominic said, not taking his eyes off Mara, "I guess that answers any questions about where we stand." Mara actually laughed, bright and unrestrained, and suddenly the terror that had been choking her for 2 days evaporated. They were standing in front of their entire team, having just kissed in a way that left no room for misinterpretation, and instead of feeling exposed, she felt for speech, someone called out. It sounded like Jessica. Dominic looked at Mara, raising an eyebrow. "Want to explain this, or should I?" "We probably should address the elephant in the room." Mara agreed, though she couldn't stop, smiling. They turned to face their team, Dominic's arm slipping naturally around her waist. "So," Dominic began, in case it wasn't obvious, "Mara and I are..." "Finally," Jessica interrupted, raising her glass. "It's about damn time." Laughter rippled through the room. "What she said," Marco added, grinning. "We've had a betting pool going for 2 years about when you'd finally get together." "You've had a what?" Mara asked, torn between amusement and mortification. "A betting pool," Aaron confirmed cheerfully. Jessica won. She guessed within a week of the actual date. "I knew the Castellano pitch would be the tipping point," Jessica said smugly. "High stakes, high pressure, working in close proximity, it was inevitable." Dominic was laughing now, the sound rich and warm. "Well, I'm glad our personal lives could provide entertainment for the office." "In all seriousness," Jessica continued, her expression softening, "we're happy for you, both of you. You're the reason this company exists, the reason we all have careers we love. If anyone deserves happiness, it's you two." Here, echoed around the room, glasses raising. Mara felt her eyes prick with unexpected tears. This team, these people they'd assembled, who'd taken chances on a young startup, had her back. Had their backs. "Thank you," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. "All of you, for everything." "Now that we've got that settled," Dominic said, squeezing her waist gently, "can we please get back to celebrating our massive victory? We just landed the biggest account in company history." Cheers erupted, and just like that, the moment passed from revelation to celebration. The music started again, conversations resumed, and the party continued. But as the evening wore on, as Mara moved through the crowd accepting congratulations and fielding good-natured teasing, she kept finding herself drawn back to Dominic. Their eyes would meet across the room, and the heat in his gaze promised conversations and kisses yet to come. Around 10 p.m., he appeared at her elbow, 2 fresh glasses of champagne in hand. "Sneak out with me," he murmured in her ear. "We can't abandon our own party," she protested, but without much conviction. "We've made the rounds. Jessica's got everything under control." He gestured toward their creative director, who was currently demonstrating an elaborate dance move that involved more enthusiasm than coordination. "Come on, let me take you to dinner. Properly. Like I promised." Mara glanced around the room at her team, celebrating a victory they'd all earned together, at the life she'd built, and then back at Dominic, who was watching her with patience and promise, and so much love it made her chest ache. "Okay," she said, setting down her champagne. "Let's go." They ended up at a small Italian restaurant in Little Italy, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles, and a grandmother actually cooking in the fade kitchen. It was the opposite of the sleek, high-end establishments Mara had expected, and somehow that made it perfect. "I used to come here in grad school," Dominic explained as they settled into a corner booth. "When I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, the owner, Mrs. Benedetto, would feed me even when I couldn't afford it." "I didn't know that," Mara said softly. "There's a lot you don't know about me." He reached across the table, lacing his fingers through hers. "I'm looking forward to changing that." Over pasta and wine, they really talked for the first time without the weight of unsaid feelings between them. Dominic told her about growing up in a working-class neighborhood in Boston, about the father who'd worked 2 jobs to send him to college, about the pressure to succeed and the fear of failure that had driven him to build something extraordinary. Mara shared stories about her childhood in San Francisco's Chinatown, about parents who'd immigrated with nothing and built a life through hard work, about the weight of expectation and the desire to make them proud, while also forging her own path. My mother still doesn't understand what I do, Mara admitted with a wry smile. She wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer, something stable. The idea of creative work as a career baffles her. But you did it anyway, Dominic said. I did it anyway, she confirmed. Because I couldn't imagine spending my life doing something that didn't set my soul on fire, even if it meant disappointing her expectations. That's what I love about you, Dominic said quietly. You're brave in ways you don't even recognize. You took a chance on this crazy idea of ours when it would have been so much easier to take a safe job at an established firm. You fight for what matters, even when it's terrifying. I'm not brave, Mara protested. I've spent the last 2 days running from my feelings for you. Running toward, eventually, he countered, with a smile. That counts. Somewhere between the main course and dessert, the conversation shifted from their pasts to their future. What do we do now? Mara asked, twirling her wine glass between her fingers. About work, I mean. We should probably establish some ground rules. Keep things professional in the office. Maybe not, Mara, Dominic interrupted gently. I don't want to compartmentalize this. I don't want to pretend at work that you're just my business partner when you're so much more. We'll be professional when we need to be. Absolutely. But I'm not going to hide how I feel about you. Even if it makes things complicated? Especially if it makes things complicated. He leaned forward, his dark eyes serious. Life is complicated. Love is complicated. But we're smart, talented people who've built a multi-million-dollar company from scratch. I think we can handle dating each other. Dating each other, Mara repeated, testing the words. That sounds terrifying? He supplied. Wonderful, she corrected, surprising herself with the truth of it. Dominic's answering smile was brilliant. Yeah? Because I have to tell you, I've been planning our first real date for about 3 years now. 3 years? Mara's eyebrows rose. You've been planning this for 3 years? Well, loosely, he admitted with a sheepish grin. I had to account for various possible scenarios. There was the, we finally admit our feelings after a major victory version which, congratulations, is the one we're currently living. There was the, I accidentally confessed during a late-night work session version. And there was the, I'm moving to another country and have to tell you before I leave dramatic version. Though that one always seemed unnecessarily cinematic. Mara was laughing now, charmed despite herself. You're ridiculous. I'm thorough, he corrected. There's a difference. What did these hypothetical dates involve? Well, this one, he gestured around the cozy restaurant, was always part of the plan. I wanted to take you somewhere that mattered to me, somewhere I could actually talk to you without the pressure of trying to impress you with expensive wine I can't pronounce. I am impressed, Mara said softly. Not by the restaurant, though it's lovely. By you, by the fact that you've been thinking about this for years and you still waited until I was ready. Of course I waited. Dominic's expression turned serious. Mara, I've spent 5 years watching you build something extraordinary. I've seen how hard you work, how much you care, how fiercely you protect the things that matter to you. I wasn't going to jeopardize any of that by pushing you into something you weren't ready for. If you'd never been ready, if you'd wanted to keep things purely professional forever, I would have accepted that. Because having you in my life as a friend and partner was always better than not having you at all. Mara's throat tightened with emotion. That might be the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Just wait, Dominic said, his eyes glinting with humor and promise. I've got 3 years of material to work through. They stayed at the restaurant until midnight, talking and laughing until Mrs. Benedetto herself came out to gently inform them that she'd like to close up for the night. You bring a girl next time, she told Dominic in heavily accented English, patting his cheek affectionately. Then she looked at Mara and smiled. Actually, you bring this girl. She's good for you. I can tell. Outside, the October air had turned cold and crisp. Mara shivered slightly, and Dominic immediately shrugged off his suit jacket, draping it around her shoulders. Very chivalrous, she teased, but she pulled the jacket closer, breathing in the scent of his cologne. I have my moments. He moved closer, until they were standing face to face on the quiet sidewalk. I should get you home. It's late, and we have a busy day. Tomorrow. We always have a busy day tomorrow, Mara pointed out. True. Dominic's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. But tonight was perfect. I didn't want to rush it. Dominic? Mara looked up at him, at the streetlight casting shadows across his features, making him look both familiar and new. What you said earlier, about not wanting to compartmentalize this, I think you're right. We've never been good at keeping work and life separate anyway. That's what makes us good partners. And what makes us good partners, Dominic said softly, is going to make us better together. He kissed her then, slowly and thoroughly, with the patience of a man who finally had permission to take his time. Mara melted into it, her hands sliding up to his shoulders, and let herself get lost in the sensation. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "This can't happen again," he quoted, his voice teasing. Mara laughed, recognizing her words from that first kiss. "You're never going to let me forget I said that, are you?" "Never," he confirmed, grinning. "Because you were wrong. This is going to happen again, and again. And every night, if you have your way?" she finished, echoing his promise. "Every night," he agreed, his expression turning serious. "Every morning, every stolen moment in the office, every late-night work session, every success, every failure, every ordinary and extraordinary moment. If you'll let me." Mara's answer was another kiss, this one initiated by her, pouring 5 years of denied feelings into the press of her lips against his. "I'll let you," she whispered, when they finally broke apart. "I want this, Dominic. I want us." His smile was radiant. "Good. Because you're stuck with me now. Promise?" she asked, half joking. "Promise," he said seriously. "In business and everything else." Chapter 4. The morning after reprise. Mara woke up to sunlight streaming through her bedroom windows and a text message that made her heart skip a beat. "Good morning, beautiful. Can't wait to see you at the office. D." She smiled at her phone like a teenager with a crush, then caught herself and laughed at her own ridiculousness. This was Dominic, her business partner of 5 years, her best friend, the man she'd been denying her feelings for since, well, probably since the day they'd met. And now, somehow, he was also the man she was dating. The thought still felt surreal. Her phone buzzed again. "Also, I bought you coffee. Your ridiculous oat milk triple shot caramel monstrosity. See you in 20? The fact that he knew her exact coffee order, including the part where she was mildly embarrassed about how complicated it was, made her chest warm with affection. "See you in 20. And it's not ridiculous, it's sophisticated. It's ridiculous, but it's your ridiculous, so I love it." Mara set down her phone, pressed her hands to her cheeks, and tried to calm her racing heart. He'd used the word love so casually, and it made her feel like she was standing on the edge of something vast and wonderful and terrifying. She was falling in love with Dominic Kane. No, if she was being honest with herself, she'd been in love with him for a long time. She'd just been too scared to admit it. 25 minutes later, she may have taken extra time with her appearance. Not that she'd admit it. Mara walked into the Kane and Chen offices carrying her ridiculous coffee and trying not to grin like an idiot. Jessica was at her desk, and she looked up with a knowing smile. "Good morning, sunshine." "Morning," Mara replied, aiming for casual and probably missing by a mile. "Dominic's in the conference room," Jessica said innocently. "He asked if you could meet him there when you arrived. Something about reviewing the Castellano timeline." "Thanks." Mara headed toward the conference room, her pulse quickening. She found Dominic standing by the windows, looking out at the Chicago skyline. He turned when he heard her enter, and his smile was warm and intimate and made her knees weak. "Hi," he said simply. "Hi." She set down her coffee cup. "You wanted to discuss the Castellano timeline?" "That was a lie," he admitted. "I just wanted to see you alone for a minute before the day starts." Before she could respond, he crossed the room and pulled her into a gentle kiss. It was brief, sweet, the kind of kiss that promised more later, but respected their professional environment. "Good morning," he murmured against her lips. "Good morning," she echoed, smiling. "Ready to take on the world together?" he asked. Mara looked at him, at the man who'd believed in her from the beginning, who'd built an empire alongside her, who'd waited years for her to be ready, and felt a certainty settle in her chest. "Ready?" she confirmed. Chapter 5. The Integration. Over the next 2 weeks, Mara learned what it meant to date your business partner. It meant stolen kisses in the supply closet that made them both laugh at how cliché they were being, It meant late-night work sessions that now ended with dinner together instead of lonely drives home. It meant inside jokes during client meetings that no one else understood. It meant the delicate dance of maintaining professionalism, while also being unable to hide the way they lit up in each other's presence. The team, to their credit, adjusted quickly. Jessica had always been perceptive, and she took it upon herself to run interference when Mara and Dominic needed time alone, whether for business discussions or otherwise. Marco and Aaron started a new betting pool about when the engagement would happen. Mara pretended to be scandalized but secretly found it endearing, and the rest of the team seemed genuinely happy for them. The Castellano campaign launched to critical acclaim. The not just another concept resonated with exactly the demographic Richard had wanted to reach, and within the first week, booking inquiries at Castellano properties increased by 37%. Richard Castellano himself called personally to congratulate them. "You've exceeded every expectation," he told them during a three-way video call. "I'm authorizing an additional campaign for our European properties. If you're interested." Mara and Dominic had exchanged a glance, the kind of wordless communication they'd perfected over 5 years of partnership. "We're interested," they'd said in unison. After the call ended, Dominic had pulled her into his arms and spun her around his office. "We did it," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion. "We actually did it." "We always do," Mara had replied and kissed him. But it wasn't all perfect. 3 weeks into their relationship, they had their first real fight. It started innocuously enough, a disagreement about the creative direction for a new client. Dominic wanted to play it safe, stick with what had worked before. Mara wanted to take a risk, push boundaries, do something unexpected. "We're not going to keep growing if we keep doing the same thing," she'd argued in the conference room, frustration making her voice sharp. "We're not going to keep growing if we alienate clients with concepts that are too far outside their comfort zone," Dominic had countered. The argument had escalated. Old resentments surfaced, times when each had felt unheard, times when compromise had felt like defeat. It wasn't really about the client anymore. It was about 5 years of partnership, where they'd sometimes sacrificed their individual visions for the sake of unity. "Maybe this is exactly what everyone warned us about," Mara had said, her voice cold. Maybe mixing business and personal was a mistake. The moment the words left her mouth, she'd regretted them. But it was too late. Dominic's expression had shuddered. "Is that really what you think?" "I don't know what I think anymore," she'd admitted, suddenly exhausted. I need some space." She'd left the office early, ignoring Jessica's concerned look, and spent the evening in her apartment replaying the fight and wondering if she'd just destroyed everything. Her phone stayed silent. By midnight, she was staring at her ceiling, unable to sleep, when she heard a knock at her door. She knew who it was before she opened it. Dominic stood in her doorway, still wearing his suit from earlier, looking tired and determined, and somehow exactly like what she needed to see. "I'm sorry," they both said simultaneously. Despite the tension, Mara felt a smile tug at her lips. "You first." "I'm sorry," Dominic repeated, stepping inside her apartment. "I was so focused on protecting what we've built that I forgot we built it by taking risks. You were right about the campaign. And even if you weren't, even if it was the worst idea in the world, I should have listened to you. Really listened, instead of just defending my position." "I'm sorry too," Mara said softly. "What I said, about mixing business and personal being a mistake, I didn't mean it. I was hurt and frustrated and I lashed out. It's not a mistake. It's the best thing that's happened to me." Dominic moved closer, cupping her face in his hands. "We're going to fight sometimes," he said. "We're both passionate, opinionated people. That's not going to change just because we're together." "I know. But we can't let fights about work bleed into our relationship," he continued. "And we can't let fears about our relationship affect our work decisions. We need to learn how to separate the two things when we need to, and integrate them when that serves us better." Mara nodded, leaning into his touch. "So how do we do that?" "Communication," Dominic said. "Honesty. And remembering that we're on the same team. Always. Even when we disagree about the path forward, we want the same destination, which is building something extraordinary," he said simply. "Together. In every sense of the word." Mara kissed him then, pouring apology and love and promise into the gesture. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "Stay," she whispered. "Always," he promised. Chapter 6. The Commitment. 2 months into their relationship, Dominic asked Mara to move in with him. They were in his apartment, a renovated loft in River North with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows, working on a presentation for a potential client. Except they weren't really working anymore. They were sitting on his couch, Mara's laptop abandoned on the coffee table, talking about everything and nothing. "I hate when you leave," Dominic said suddenly. "Every night, when you go back to your place, I miss you." Mara turned to look at him. "I'm here almost every night anyway." "I know, so why don't you just stay, move in with me?" "Officially." Her heart stuttered. "That's Dominic. We've only been dating for 2 months. We've been partners for 5 years," he countered. "We've already navigated the hard parts, learning how to work together, building trust, figuring out how to communicate. Moving in together is just making official what's already happening." He wasn't wrong. She kept clothes at his apartment. Her shampoo was in his shower. Half of his kitchen was stocked with her favorite foods. They'd already integrated their lives in almost every way that mattered. "What about my lease?" she asked, grasping for practical concerns. "Ends in 2 months anyway, doesn't it?" It did. She'd told him that weeks ago. "What about space?" she tried. "You're used to living alone. Maybe you'll get tired of me being around all the time." Dominic turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his. "Mara, I will never get tired of you. You're the first person I want to see in the morning and the last person I want to talk to at night. You're my partner in every way that matters. Moving in together just makes sense." "It's fast," she said weakly. "We're not 19-year-olds rushing into something without thinking," Dominic pointed out. "We're adults who've known each other for years and have already built a life together. This is just the next natural step." Mara looked around his apartment at the space that had slowly become as familiar to her as her own place. At the bookshelf where her novels sat mixed with his business books. At the kitchen where they cooked together on weekends. At the bedroom where she'd spent more nights than she could count. He was right. This already felt like home. "Okay," she said. Dominic blinked. "Okay? Okay," she repeated, smiling. "Yes, I'll move in with you." His answering smile was incandescent. "Yeah? Yeah." Mara laughed at his obvious delight. "On one condition. Anything. We need a better office space. Your desk situation is a disaster." Dominic pulled her into his lap, kissing her soundly. "Done. We'll convert the spare room. Proper desks, good lighting, whatever you need. And we need to establish some ground rules," Mara continued, though it was getting harder to think with Dominic's lips trailing down her neck. "About work-life balance. No working past 9 p.m. unless it's an emergency. Weekends are for us, not clients." "Agreed," he murmured against her skin. "Anything else?" "We take turns cooking. I'm not going to be the only one making dinner just because." She broke off, laughing as he tickled her ribs. "Dominic!" "I love you," he said, pulling back to look at her, his expression suddenly serious. "I know I've said it before, but I need you to know I am completely, impossibly in love with you. And having you move in with me is quite possibly the best thing that's ever happened to me." Mara's breath caught. She'd known. Of course, he'd told her before, shown her in 1,000 small ways, but hearing it still made her chest ache with the enormity of it. "I love you too," she whispered. "So much it terrifies me sometimes. Good terrifying or bad terrifying?" "Good," she assured him. "Definitely good." Dominic kissed her again, slow and sweet and full of promise. Welcome home, Mara Chen. Chapter 7. The Crisis. The crisis came, as crises often do, without warning. Mara was in the middle of a client call when Jessica appeared in her doorway, her face pale and drawn. Mara wrapped up the call quickly, her stomach already sinking. "What's wrong?" "We have a problem," Jessica said quietly, closing the door. "A big one. Thomas Whitmore from Castellano just called. He's furious." Mara's blood ran cold. "What happened?" "Someone leaked our campaign strategy to Preston and Associates. They're pitching the exact same concept to Castellano's biggest competitor tomorrow morning." The world tilted sideways. Preston and Associates was one of the biggest agencies in Chicago, the kind of established powerhouse that Kane and Chen had been competing against since their founding. If they'd stolen the campaign concept, it was devastating, and if Castellano thought Kane and Chen had somehow been careless with confidential information. How? Mara managed. "We don't know yet. Dominic's already pulling security logs, checking who had access to the campaign files, but Mara Whitmore is threatening to pull the account. He thinks we leaked it ourselves as insurance, in case Castellano's competitor wanted to hire us too. That's insane, Mara said, her voice sharp. We would never... I know, but it looks bad. Really bad. Mara was already heading for Dominic's office. She found him at his computer, his expression grim, clicking through what looked like server logs. Tell me you found something, she said without preamble. He looked up, and the bleakness in his eyes made her stomach drop. I found something. You're not going to like it. Show me. Dominic turned his laptop around. On the screen was a list of file access logs, time-stamped and detailed. One username appeared multiple times, accessing the Castellano campaign files late at night, downloading presentations and strategy documents. Marco Rodriguez. No, Mara said immediately. No, there has to be a mistake. Marco wouldn't... I don't want to believe it either, Dominic said heavily. But the logs don't lie. His username, his computer, his credentials. He accessed these files 2 weeks ago and again last week. The same files that somehow ended up at Preston and Associates. Mara sank into the chair across from his desk, her mind racing. Marco was 23, talented, enthusiastic. He'd been with them for 2 years. She'd mentored him personally, helped him develop his skills, championed his work to clients. We need to talk to him, she said. Agreed. I asked Jessica to have him come to the conference room in 10 minutes. Dominic closed his laptop and rubbed his face tiredly. Mara, if he did this, if he actually sold our work to a competitor, we have to fire him. Immediately. And probably pursue legal action. I know. The words felt like ash in her in-mouth. The conference room meeting was brutal. Marco walked in looking confused and slightly nervous. When Dominic explained what they'd discovered, the color drained from his face. I didn't leak anything, he said immediately, his voice rising. I would never, you have to believe me. Then explain why your credentials were used to access and download confidential campaign files, Dominic said, his voice hard. Explain why those exact files ended up at our competitor. I don't know. Marco's hands were shaking. I mean, yes, I accessed the files. I was working on the copywriting, refining some of the taglines. But I never downloaded anything. I never sent anything to anyone. This doesn't make sense. Your computer shows downloads, Dominic said, pulling up the logs. Right here. Full presentation decks, strategy documents, everything. Marco stared at the screen, and Mara watched emotions play across his young face: confusion, horror, and then, suddenly, recognition. My laptop, he said slowly. 2 weeks ago my laptop was acting weird, slow, overheating. I took it to IT to get it checked out. And, Mara prompted, and they said there was some kind of malware on it. They cleaned it off, said it probably came from a phishing email or something. Marco looked between them desperately. What if that's how someone got my credentials? What if they used the malware to access my computer remotely? It was plausible. More than plausible. Mara had read about corporate espionage cases that used exactly that method. I need to talk to IT, Dominic said, already reaching for his phone. If there was malware on Marco's computer, we need to know what kind and what it accessed. The IT investigation took 2 hours. What they discovered was worse than Mara had imagined. The malware had been sophisticated, targeted, and specifically designed to steal credentials and access confidential files. It had been on Marco's computer for 3 weeks, during which time it had harvested his login information and used it to access the Castellano campaign files after hours, when Marco wasn't even in the office. And the source of the malware? A phishing email that had appeared to come from Dominic himself, asking Marco to review an urgent presentation. Someone had been specifically targeting Kane and Chen Creative, trying to steal their work. Preston and Associates, Mara said, the pieces clicking together. They have to be behind this. They lost the Castellano pitch to us. They've been competing with us for years. This is corporate espionage. We need lawyers, Dominic said grimly. And we need to call Richard Castellano immediately, explain what happened before Preston pitches tomorrow. The next several hours were a blur of phone calls, legal consultations, and damage control. Richard Castellano, to his credit, listened carefully to their explanation and reviewed the IT evidence they provided. Thomas Whitmore was less forgiving, but even he had to acknowledge that Kane and Chen had been the victims rather than the perpetrators. We're moving forward with legal action against Preston and Associates, Richard told them during a late-night video call. What they did is unconscionable. And Kane and Chen, you've handled this with integrity and transparency. Your contract remains intact. When the call ended, Mara slumped in her chair, exhausted and emotionally drained. We almost lost everything, she said quietly. Dominic moved around the desk and pulled her into his arms. But we didn't. We figured it out. We protected the company. We got lucky, Mara corrected, her voice muffled against his chest. If Marco hadn't remembered the IT issue, if we hadn't been able to trace the malware, but we did. Dominic interrupted gently. And you know what this proves? That we're not just good at the creative work and the business development. We're good at crisis management too. We're a team, Mara. In every situation, good and bad. She pulled back to look at him. I was terrified today. Not just about losing the Castellano account, but about what it might do to us. What if we disagreed about how to handle it? What if this kind of stress had torn us apart? It didn't, Dominic said firmly. Because we're stronger than that. Because we trust each other. And because when things get hard, we face them together. Mara kissed him, pouring gratitude and love and relief into the gesture. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For being exactly who I needed you to be. Today and always. Chapter 8. The Expansion. 6 months into their relationship, Kane and Chen Creative received an offer that would change everything. Marcus Brennan, founder and CEO of Brennan Media Group, one of the largest advertising conglomerates in the world, wanted to acquire them. $60 million, Dominic said, staring at the offer letter. They were in their home office, having converted the spare room exactly as Mara had insisted. He's offering $60 million for Kane and Chen. Mara couldn't breathe. That's insane, Dominic finished. That's absolutely insane. They'd built the company from nothing, and now someone was offering them enough money to never work again, to retire at 30, to do whatever they wanted for the rest of their lives. What do we want to do? Mara asked quietly. Dominic set down the letter and turned to face her. I don't know. What do you want to do? It was the question that mattered most. Not what made financial sense. Not what was smart business, but what they wanted. What would make them happy? I love this company, Mara said slowly, working through her thoughts out loud. I love what we've built, the team we've assembled, the work we create. The idea of selling it, of watching someone else take over and potentially change everything we've worked for, it makes me feel sick. But? Dominic prompted, because he knew her well enough to hear the hesitation. But $60 million is life-changing money, Mara admitted. It's financial security for our families. It's the ability to start new ventures without risk. It's a lot. It is, Dominic agreed. He moved closer, taking her hands. So let me ask you a different question. If money wasn't a factor, if we had all the financial security in the world, would you want to keep running Kane and Chen? Yes, Mara said without hesitation. Absolutely yes. Me too. Dominic's smile was relieved. So here's what I'm thinking. We counteroffer. We tell Brennan that we're not interested in a full acquisition, but we might be interested in a partnership. They get a minority stake, maybe 20%. We get capital to expand internationally, to hire more talent, to take on bigger clients. But we maintain creative control and operational independence. Hope flared in Mara's chest. You think he'd go for that? Only one way to do. Find out. The negotiations took 3 weeks. Marcus Brennan was a savvy businessman who'd built his empire through strategic acquisitions. But he was also someone who respected entrepreneurial spirit. He'd started his first agency at 26 and understood the desire to maintain independence. In the end, they reached an agreement. Brennan Media Group would acquire a 25% stake in Kane and Chen Creative for $20 million. Kane and Chen would maintain complete creative and operational control, with Mara and Dominic remaining as co-CEOs. Brennan would provide access to their international network, their resources, and their expertise, but Kane and Chen would remain autonomous. It was, as Jessica put it, the best of both worlds. The day they signed the contracts, Mara and Dominic stood in their office, looking out at the Chicago skyline, and allowed themselves a moment to process what they'd accomplished. We did it, Mara said softly. We actually did it. We built something that one of the biggest media conglomerates in the world wanted to buy, Dominic agreed. And then we negotiated terms that let us keep building it our way. So, what's next? Mara asked, turning to face him. Dominic's expression turned serious, intimate. Actually, I've been thinking about that. About what's next for us. Something in his tone made her pulse quicken. Oh. Instead of answering, he pulled a small velvet box from his desk drawer. Mara's breath caught. I know we've only been together for 6 months, Dominic said, moving to stand in front of her. And I know we've done everything slightly out of order, started as business partners before becoming friends. Became friends before admitting we wanted more. Moved in together before most people would consider it appropriate. Dominic. But here's the thing, he continued, his dark eyes intense. I've known for 5 years that you're the most extraordinary person I've ever met. I've known for months that I'm completely in love with you. And I know with absolute certainty that I want to spend the rest of my life building things with you. Companies, campaigns, a home, a future, everything. He opened the box, revealing a stunning emerald-cut diamond set in platinum. Mara Chen, will you marry me? Mara's vision blurred with tears. You're supposed to be on one knee. I'm already on one knee, Dominic said, and she looked down to realize he was. So what do you say? Want to make this partnership official in every possible way? Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes. Absolutely yes. Dominic's smile was radiant as he slid the ring onto her finger. Then he was standing, pulling her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made her dizzy. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, Mara held up her hand to admire the ring. It's beautiful, she said. It's perfect, Dominic corrected. Like you, like us. What are we going to tell the team? Mara asked suddenly, practical even in the midst of overwhelming emotion. They already have a betting pool about when this would happen. Jessica's going to be insufferable. Let her be insufferable, Dominic said, pulling her close again. We just built a multi-million-dollar company, negotiated an incredible partnership deal, and got engaged. I think we've earned the right to let our team celebrate with us. Mara laughed, pressing her face into his shoulder. I love you. I love you too, he murmured into her hair. Every single day. For the rest of our lives. Chapter 9. The Wedding. They got married 6 months later. In a ceremony that was exactly what they both wanted, intimate, meaningful, and surrounded by the people who mattered most. The venue was a renovated warehouse in the West Loop, exposed brick and industrial beams softened by thousands of white flowers and candlelight. Their team had helped with the planning. Of course, Jessica had taken charge of coordination with the kind of military precision she usually reserved for client launches, while Marco had written custom vows that had made both Mara and Dominic cry during the rehearsal. Mara's parents had flown in from San Francisco, and watching her father walk her down the aisle healthy now, after the scare that had sent her fleeing from that first kiss, made her heart feel too full for her chest. Dominic waited for her at the altar, looking devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. When she reached him, he took her hands and whispered, "Hi." "Hi," she whispered back, smiling through tears. The ceremony was beautiful. They'd written their own vows, speaking words of partnership and promise that reflected not just their romantic relationship but the entire journey they'd taken together. 5 years ago, Dominic said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. You took a chance on a crazy idea. You agreed to start a company with someone you barely knew, in a garage, with nothing but determination and dreams. You've been my partner in every way that matters since that day. Today, I promise to be your partner in all the ways we haven't explored yet. I promise to support your dreams, challenge your ideas, and always have your back. I promise to love you through successes and failures, through easy days and impossible ones. I promise to be the person you can count on, no matter what. Mara was crying openly now. 5 years ago, she managed, I met someone who saw potential in me that I didn't see in myself. Someone who pushed me to be braver, smarter, more ambitious. Dominic, you've been my best friend, my business partner, and the love of my life, though it took me entirely too long to admit that last part. Laughter rippled through the gathered guests. I promise to keep taking chances with you, Mara continued. I promise to trust you with my ideas, my fears, and my heart. I promise to be your partner in building not just companies, but a life. I promise to love you fiercely and completely, every single day. And I promise that when I whisper this can't happen again, you have permission to remind me that I'm wrong. Dominic's laugh was watery with tears. Every night, he said, echoing his promise from that first kiss. Every night, Mara agreed. When the officiant pronounced them married, Dominic kissed her with a passion that would have scandalized traditional weddings but was perfectly appropriate for theirs. Their guests cheered. The reception was everything they'd hoped: good food, better wine, and the people they loved celebrating the life they'd built together. Jessica's toast was both hilarious and touching, recounting the early days of Kane and Chen, and making several pointed remarks about how everyone had known they'd end up together. Marco read a poem he'd written specifically for them. Even Richard Castellano had sent a congratulatory video message and a obscenely expensive bottle of champagne. Late in the evening, Mara and Dominic snuck away from the party to the warehouse rooftop, where they could see the Chicago skyline glittering in the darkness. "Mrs. Kane," Dominic said, pulling her close. "How does that feel?" "Actually, I'm keeping Chen professionally," Mara corrected with a smile. "Kane and Chen has good brand recognition. But personally, Mrs. Kane feels perfect." "Kane Chen?" Dominic suggested. "We could hyphenate. Make it official that we're a package deal." "I like that," Mara said softly. "Kane Chen, together in everything." "Together in everything," Dominic echoed, and kissed her under the stars. Chapter 10. The Challenge. 2 years into their marriage, Kane and Chen Creative faced their biggest challenge yet. The economy had taken an unexpected downturn. Several major clients had cut their marketing budgets. 2 of their key accounts had been forced to declare bankruptcy, and suddenly, the company that had been growing exponentially was facing the very real possibility of layoffs. "We have to cut at least 5 positions," Dominic said, his voice heavy. They were in his office, their office now, since they'd renovated to create a shared space, reviewing financial projections that grew bleaker with every quarter. "Maybe more. The numbers don't work otherwise." Mara felt sick. "These are people, Dominic. People with families, mortgages, lives. We can't just—" "I know," he said quietly. "Believe me, I know. But if we don't make cuts now, we might have to close entirely in 6 months. Then everyone loses their jobs." It was the kind of impossible decision that kept business owners awake at night. There were no good options, only varying degrees of terrible ones. "What if we took pay cuts ourselves?" Mara suggested. "Reduced executive salaries? Delayed our own bonuses?" "I already ran those numbers," Dominic said, showing her his laptop. "It helps, but it's not enough. We'd still need to cut at least 3 positions." They spent the next week exploring every possible alternative. They renegotiated office space to reduce rent. They delayed equipment upgrades. They cut discretionary spending to the bone. Dominic reached out to every contact he had, hustling for new business with a desperation he hadn't felt since their first year. Mara worked 18-hour days, pitching to potential clients, trying to drum up new revenue. It still wasn't enough. The day they had to make the final decision, Mara couldn't stop crying. They'd built this company on the principle of taking care of their team, of creating an environment where talented people could thrive. Now they were about to tell 3 people, 3 loyal, hard-working employees, that they no longer had jobs. "I hate this," she whispered, sitting in Dominic's lap in their office after everyone else had gone home. "I hate that we have to do this." "I know," he said, holding her close. "I hate it too. What if we're making the wrong choice? What if there's another option we haven't considered?" "We've considered everything, Mara. We've looked at this from every possible angle. This is the only way to keep the company viable." She knew he was right. That didn't make it easier. The next morning, they sat down with the 3 employees they'd chosen, all based on complicated calculations involving seniority, redundancy, and position necessity, and delivered the news with as much compassion as they could muster. Each conversation was heartbreaking. By the end of the day, Mara felt like she'd aged 10 years. "This is the part they don't tell you about in business school," she said to Dominic that evening, sitting on their couch with a glass of wine she couldn't bring herself to drink. "How much it hurts to let people go. How personal it feels, even when it's purely financial." "No," Dominic agreed quietly. "They don't prepare you for that part." They sat in silence for a long moment. "We're going to rebuild," Mara said finally, more to convince herself than him. "We're going to land new clients, grow the company again, and eventually rehire. This is temporary." "It is," Dominic said firmly, pulling her against his side. "We've survived worse. We'll survive this too." And they did. Over the next 6 months, they worked harder than they ever had. They pitched constantly, took on projects they would have declined before, stretched their existing team to capacity. Slowly, painfully, the company stabilized. By the end of the year, they were hiring again. And when they did, they made sure to reach out to the 3 employees they'd had to let go, offering them positions again if they wanted to come back. 2 of them did. The 3rd had found another opportunity and politely declined, but thanked them for thinking of him. The experience changed something fundamental in how they approached business. They built larger reserves, maintained better contingency plans, and never again took their stability for granted. "We're stronger for it," Dominic said one night, reviewing their recovered financials. "As much as it sucked, we learned how to weather a real crisis." "I'd prefer not to repeat the lesson," Mara said dryly. "Agreed." He pulled her into his arms. "But here's what I've learned. No matter what challenges we face, economic downturns, corporate espionage, difficult clients, impossible decisions, we face them together. And that makes all the difference." Mara kissed him softly. "Together in everything. Together in everything," he echoed. Chapter 11. The Future. 5 years after that first kiss, 7 years after founding the company, Mara stood in the lobby of the new Kane Chen Creative Headquarters, a gleaming office building in the heart of Chicago's Loop, and marveled at everything they'd built. The company now employed 75 people across 3 offices in Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles. They'd won every major industry award, landed clients they'd once only dreamed of pitching, and built a reputation as one of the most innovative agencies in the country. But more than that, they'd created something that mattered, a workplace where talented people could thrive, a company culture built on integrity, creativity, and mutual respect, a legacy that would outlast them. "Penny for your thoughts," Dominic said, appearing at her elbow with 2 cups of coffee. "Just thinking about how far we've come," Mara said, accepting the coffee. "Remember when we were working out of your garage? When we thought landing a $50,000 account was the pinnacle of success? I remember thinking you were insane for agreeing to start a company with me," Dominic said with a smile. "I remember being terrified we'd fail and take your career down with mine." "Best risk I ever took," Mara said softly. "Second best," Dominic corrected. "The best risk you took was kissing me that night," Mara laughed. "I seem to recall saying this can't happen again." "And I seem to recall being absolutely right when I said it would," Dominic replied smugly. "Every night, in fact." "Every night," Mara agreed, stretching up to kiss him. They were interrupted by Jessica rushing toward them, iPad in hand, looking harried but excited. "Sorry to interrupt the romantic moment," she said, "but we have a situation. Good situation, not bad situation. The mayor's office just called. They want to hire us for the city's entire rebranding campaign. It's massive, biggest public sector project we've ever been offered." Mara and Dominic exchanged a look, the kind of wordless communication they'd perfected over 7 years of partnership. "Tell them yes," they said in unison. Jessica grinned. "Already did. We have a meeting tomorrow at 9. Mara, they specifically requested you for creative direction. Dominic, they want you handling the business strategy. Surprise, surprise, they want the dream team." After Jessica hurried off, Dominic turned to Mara with a thoughtful expression. "What?" she asked. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, "about the future, about what's next for us. We just landed the biggest project of our career. Isn't that next? I mean, personally," he clarified, "we've built this incredible company. We have an amazing team, loyal clients, financial stability. The business is exactly where we want it to be. And," Mara prompted, sensing there was more, "and I think maybe it's time to think about building something else." Dominic said, "A family." Mara's breath caught. "You want to have kids?" "I want to have everything with you," he said simply. "The business, the home, the future, all of it. But yes, I want kids. Specifically, I want kids with you. Little creative geniuses who'll probably take over the company someday and run circles around us both." Tears pricked Mara's eyes. "That sounds perfect." "Yeah?" His smile was hopeful, vulnerable. "Yeah," she confirmed. "Let's build something new, together." Dominic pulled her into a fierce hug, and Mara let herself imagine it, the life they'd continue building, the family they'd create, the future stretching out before them full of possibility. They'd started as business partners, become best friends, fallen in love, and built an empire together. Now they were embarking on the greatest adventure yet, and Mara knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever challenges came, whatever obstacles they faced, they'd handle them the same way they'd handled everything else, together. Epilogue. Every night, 8 years after founding Chen Creative, Mara sat in the rocking chair in their home nursery, holding their 3-month-old daughter and feeling overwhelmed with gratitude. Emma Chen had her father's dark hair and her mother's determination, demonstrated by the way she refused to sleep at reasonable hours. Dominic was convinced she'd inherited both their stubborn streaks, which he claimed was either going to make her unstoppable or impossible, possibly both. Right now, at 2 in the morning, Mara was leaning toward impossible. "Come on, baby girl," she murmured, rocking gently. "Sleep is good. Sleep is wonderful. Why don't we try some sleep?" Emma's response was to grab a fistful of Mara's hair and yank. "She gets that from you," Dominic said from the doorway, his voice rough with sleep. He padded into the nursery, wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt, his hair adorably disheveled. "The refusal to give up until she's won. She gets it from both of us," Mara corrected. "We're both ridiculously stubborn people who created an even more stubborn human." Dominic sat on the arm of the rocking chair, draping his arm around Mara's shoulders and peering down at their daughter with undisguised adoration. "Hi, Emma. It's the middle of the night." The appropriate response to the middle of the night is sleeping. Emma cooed at him, her tiny fingers releasing Mara's hair to reach for Dominic instead. "Traitor," Mara muttered, but she was smiling. They sat together in the quiet nursery. The only sound Emma's contented noises and the gentle creak of the rocking chair. Outside, Chicago slept the city where they'd built their business, their home, their life. "You know what I was thinking about?" Dominic said quietly. That first kiss, when you said this can't happen again and I told you it would." "Every night." Mara turned to look at him. And I was right," he said with a grin. "It has happened every night. Not the kiss. Specifically, sometimes we're too exhausted or covered in baby spit up, but us. This partnership, this love, every single night, I'm more certain that you're the best decision I ever made." "Even at 2 in the morning when our daughter refuses to sleep?" Mara asked, though her voice was thick with emotion. "Especially then," Dominic confirmed. He leaned in to kiss her, soft and sweet. "You're extraordinary, Mara Chen. In business and everything else." "We're extraordinary," she corrected. Together, he agreed. Emma chose that moment to finally drift off to sleep. They sat there a moment longer, reluctant to break the peace, before carefully transferring her to the crib. She settled with a tiny sigh, one fist curled near her cheek. Back in their bedroom, Dominic pulled Mara into his arms. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking," Mara said slowly, "that 8 years ago, if someone had told me I'd be here, married to my business partner, running a successful company, holding our daughter, I would have thought they were crazy. I was so convinced that mixing business and personal was impossible. And now? Now I know that it's not impossible," she said softly. "It's just hard, but all the best things are hard. Building the company was hard. Learning to trust you was hard. Having the courage to admit I was in love with you was hard. But every hard thing we've done together has been worth it." "No regrets?" Dominic asked, though she could hear the smile in his voice. "Not a single one," Mara confirmed. Except maybe that first night, when you whispered, "This can't happen again," and tried to run." She laughed quietly. "Except that. I wasted time we could have had together. We had exactly the timeline we needed," Dominic said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "If we'd rushed into it earlier, maybe it wouldn't have worked. Maybe we needed those 5 years of building trust, learning to communicate, becoming true partners before we became anything else." "Maybe," Mara agreed, though she suspected they would have found their way to each other regardless. Some things were simply inevitable. They lay together in the darkness, wrapped in each other's arms, listening to the soft sound of their daughter breathing through the baby monitor. "Every night," Dominic whispered, echoing his promise from 8 years ago. "Every night," Mara agreed, and kissed him deeply. It had started with a kiss and a whispered fear, with professional boundaries and suppressed feelings. It had become a partnership that transcended categories, a love that strengthened rather than compromised their work, a life built together through ambition and courage and unwavering commitment. And every night, through business crises and personal challenges, through triumphs and setbacks, through the ordinary moments and the extraordinary ones, they chose each other. together in everything, forever.